And now we will go on in the spirit of this World Forum for Democracy for a conversation of generations. A veteran of the European democratizations movement and a youth delegate discuss together the lessons from the past and hopes for the future.
So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ms. Lana Gogoberidze, who's Georgian film director and politician, and a former member of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, former ambassador, together with Mr. Isaac, who is a youth delegate from Sweden. A big round of applause too. Thank you.
So it's a pleasure sitting here today, and we are going to discuss some intergenerational topics together. So from your personal experience, what are the most significant lessons that you and your generation learned from the aftermath of the Second World War?
My life passed, the biggest part of my life passed in Soviet Union, in this authoritarian regime, and it is not so easy to live in this world. Now it's easy to say 60 or 70 years in Soviet Union, but essentially, it means that it was a time of atrocities and crimes against humanity which were occurred by Nazi or communist regime. It was absolutely the same thing, really. And it means also that whole my childhood, for instance, passed in the atmosphere of fear, of uncertainty. We are always waiting that somebody will be arrested or executed and so on. And it was not easy really to live at that time. For instance, I can tell you about myself, about my family. First, even before I was born, my aunts who were against communist regime, we can say so. They were arrested in 20s, early in 20s. One of them sent to Siberia, and there she died. Two others were expelled from Soviet Union. Then my father was, when the great purges began, he was arrested and executed. My mother passed 10 years in Gulag. My uncle, with which I lived after my mother was arrested, he was his professors in Berlin University were Planck and Einstein. He was a very well-known physician. He was arrested when the war began, and he died in prison. Then you can imagine in which situation I really lived, and it is not easy to remember and to speak about all these things, but still, it was just the 20th century when the first international organizations were created, and I personally think that it was the very important event in the life of whole mankind, because it was for the first time when mankind realized that only by unity you can defeat evil. It was the only way to be united and to fight against the empire of evil, for instance, and also of all expressions of the evil in the world. And at that moment, you know, it was really for us, for post-Soviet countries, it was even of even more, it had even more importance for us. It was vital, really, for us. And I can say on behalf of Georgia that while whole our history we were alone, as a little tiny country, you can say, encountered by huge empires. They were invading us and destroying us and so on. Whole our history we sent alone. And only this possibility to access international organization gave us the possibility of not feeling solitude. It was the overcoming of solitude. It was really a beautiful sense, really. And you know, even today we are in the same position. We are waiting. We have to access to European Union. Even today we are waiting for first resolution about first recommendation, and it is of vital importance for us, really, I can assure you.
Yeah, I think it's very...
I'm speaking too much, I think.
No, speak. I love to hear you speak. Yeah, I think it's very hard for me as, for the most part, being young and from Sweden, which is a very privileged place, of course. I think it's very important for me to hear all of these perspectives, so they're not forgotten when your generation is passing over the world to us, so we can learn from what you've done.
You ask me about values, yeah?
What do you say?
You ask me about values.
Failures. I mean, yeah, do you think your generation has failed in some capacity, or is there something that worries you?
I don't understand what you are saying.
Oh no, I just added to what you said before.
I think that you told me that you had a question about our values.
Oh, values. Oh, sorry. Yeah, values. Do you want to...
Then we speak different English.
Yes,
I speak Georgian English,
yes.
and you...
I speak the modern youth English. Very hard to understand for your boomers.
You Swedish English, yeah? Okay. Maybe we can agree.
Yeah, we can. What do you think are the... Because you spoke of unity, are there some other value that you think is core to your generation and the things you fought for?
Yeah. You know, if speaking about the values, I can say that I can't speak about the values of whole mankind, our generation of whole mankind, because I really don't know exactly what it means. But I can speak about our values, my personal, and values of my friends, because this I know what they were. And how they, especially, maybe it's interesting how they were formed, these values, you know. For instance, I can tell you, I was 8 years old, and in Soviet Union, there was a tradition to celebrate the Soviet holidays very widely, even in schools. And this was one of these days, 7 November, big Soviet holiday, and I was expected to recite a poem. I had to recite a poem of Victor Hugo, sur les barricades au milieu de pavés souillés d'un sang coupable de sang pur lavé, un enfant de 12 ans fut pris avec les hommes. Est-il de cela, toi, oui, dit l'enfant, nous en sommes, etc., etc. And well, and suddenly some other child was called to the stage. I was stunned because I couldn't understand what is happening. I was prepared to recite, and I loved it very much in this poem especially. And then my teacher, she saw that I was very agitated, and she tried to explain me, you know, we are forbidden to make a child whose father is arrested recite a poem. And you have father arrested and mother too. Then it is absolutely impossible for you to recite a poem. And it was the first experience for me, you know, and maybe it was first time I realized that I was different from others. I have no right to recite a poem, and that was, at that moment, I felt the first protest against the regime even. And now, looking back, I realized that it was just at that moment, maybe I felt that I'll never be a victim. I refuse to be a victim, and that I refuse to go. Yes, you know, it was really a very important moment in my life when I refused to go to that school. I changed the school. I was 8 years old. I changed the school, and I recited then poems everywhere I could because I loved it and decided that I have to do it in spite of all difficulties I have. Well, and then there was another moment when the children who really, Soviet children who really loved literature, we decided to be unified in the literary studying group. And there we discovered another word, not the word of fear, of terror, but quite different word, the word of poetry. And the poetry became for us a real refuge. Even it's, when I remember now, it was something very important, you know, that, for instance, a boy of 15 years wrote a poem which begins so, today my sorrow has a, no, today my joy has a color of sorrow. You know, it's very well said, really. Joy, which has color of sorrow. And whole our life was passed in such a situation. You know, we enjoyed life, but our joy had the color of sorrow. And this was also our possibility of live in this surrounding of terror, of fear, of uncertainty. And afterward, I read somewhere, I put it here somewhere, that Stefan Hessel, maybe you know this name, he was ambassador of France, survival of Buchenwald, a very well-known person in the world for human rights especially. And he wrote that I don't know where I noted it, but so he says that in the most difficult situation, he discovered something, a shelter, which helped him to preserve dignity and even some kind of tranquility. He speaks about concentration camp, and that this shelter was poetry. And it was very stunning, really, for me, because I felt that we had the same feeling, we Soviet children, poor Soviet children, in those years. And a very well-known person who really felt the same, that poetry can be really some kind of salvation. And it happened so for us. Then speaking about our values, these were our values.
Wow. I mean, I do also think that poetry and to express yourself in different ways is really important today as well. In a time where censorship is going up, especially in my country, Sweden, for example, it's so important that we have the courage to stand up and express our feelings, express our emotions, express our thoughts. That is how we keep our democracy alive in the end. So I think it was a very, very beautiful explanation by you. It was very nice.
Yes, you know, I can also tell you that at that moment, I really had experienced, speaking about poetry, that, for instance, Charles Baudelaire was writing about my youth. I was absolutely sure that was my youth when he speaks. Ma jeunesse ne fut qu'un ténébreux orage, traversée ça et là par de brillants soleils. Le tonnerre et la pluie ont fait un tel ravage qu'il reste dans mon jardin bien peu de fruits vermeils. Voilà que j'ai touché l'automne des idées qu'il faut employer la pelle et le râteau pour rassembler à neuf les terres inondées où l'eau creuse des trous grands comme des tombeaux. Et qui sait si les fleurs nouvelles que je rêve trouveront dans ce sol lavé comme une grève le mystique aliment qui ferait leur vigueur. Ô douleur, le temps mange la vie et l'obscur ennemi qui nous ronge le cœur du sang que nous perdons croît et se fortifie. Voilà, et c'était pour moi vraiment...
That's so beautiful. I'm just conscious of the time. Maybe, Lana, if you want to ask a few questions, we have about 10 minutes left, so maybe we could reverse the dynamic. Maybe you have some questions.
Maybe now I can pose you the questions.
Yes, if you have something you want to ask me.
Oh yeah, I have something I have noticed.
Very nice.
What have you learned from our successes and our failures? And can you teach us?
Yes. So I want to start off with saying that after listening to you ramble in French, I really wish that I understood French. So maybe that's my next project. But I think that your generation has taught us that peace and democracy is possible. You have done it before, and it's possible to do it again. So I think that's the main takeaway that I have from your generation. And something that we can teach you, I think it is to, this is very youth-based, but to invite us into the rooms of power, because youth want to change the world, and the youth can change the world. We just need to be invited to these kinds of forums, so we get the chance to speak. And I also think something that maybe we can't teach you, but something that is very important is that you take care of us as youths, because our spark when we were young, our passion for different topics, it doesn't matter if it is for French poetry, if it is for football, if it is for politics, democracy, that spark and that passion is what is keeping our society to develop. And I think that's a really important point as well.
How do you envision the use of resources that we didn't have in order to promote democratic values and peace? It is a double-edged sword.
Yes, I definitely think it's a double-edged sword. When I think of technology, I think mostly of social media, because that's the dramatic change that our generation have, but you didn't, and many of you in the room even did not have when you grew up. And I think it's a double-edged sword because it is so easy to get information everywhere. And the double edge comes when we need to evaluate what information is correct and what source to trust. So it could be a great thing with social media that we can spread our message and we can learn about situations from all over the world. But it could also mean that we get the wrong information that makes us see the world in a way that's not true, and it's very hurtful in a way as well. So yeah, it is really a double-edged sword.
Are young people today sufficiently engaged in the general welfare of their communities and of the planet to take on the great challenges ahead? Or are they too much focused on their individual selves and short-term goals?
That is a very good question. I do agree that my generation is more individualistic than yours, but I think that you have a very good reason to be it as well. I mean, there's a lot going on in the world that we don't have any power to affect. Then I think it's a natural reaction that you maybe keep to yourself and that you think of yourself more when the times are tough. But I think that, as you said before, that the solution to the world's problems are a united one and is a global one. And I think that we as youth needs to understand that, very nice comic by the way, that we need to understand that global issues or issues around the world is also affecting us. So me in Sweden, I'm affected by what is happening in Africa, in Asia, in the US, and what's happening in this room, in the EU Parliament. So I think more young people need to understand that as well. But I would also say that, as I said before, you all that are sitting in here, maybe not youth delegates, but for those who identify as adults, you also have a responsibility to, as I said before, invite us to these forums. As you've seen as youth delegates, as discussants, we love to speak. We love to express our thoughts and our emotions. So give us the space.
Thank you very much indeed to both of you for what an interesting and unique conversation, to totally different perspectives, but we were absolutely delighted to have you share your conversation, your questions and your answers with each other. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Give them a big round of applause, please. Yes, sir.